So good morning, everyone. I'm Hlavacek, and I'm here to talk about legal and policy implications for AI. Just wanted to say thank you to Jerry Johnson and all the team, particularly the volunteers who put this event on. It's been a great event, but really appreciate that. When I told my team I was actually coming to this event today, I kind of asked them for some titles for my presentation, and I told them that I was going to an event that was themed as CornCon, and so I'm guessing that they used AI, but they sent me a bunch of titles that were kind of 1980s cult horror-style titles that if you've ever written policy or been in the GRC space, you'll kind of understand them. They're kind of funny, so let me hit a couple of them before we get on to the business of the day. But a nightmare on Compliance Street when when governance goes to sleep and bad models come out to play. Friday the 14 controls because 13 isn't enough to keep your model alive. The Texas Red Line Massacre, drafts, edits, and the final cut no one survives. Kernel panic, when your policy can't boot your model. Silent stocks, the scariest part of governance is what you can't see. Harvest of compliance, reap what you document. And then my favorite two, it came from the data lake, murky inputs, monstrous outputs, or the toxic data set. It's not sludge, it's your training data. So I thought those were kind of amusing. So this is me, Hlavacek. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I can provide the slides if they aren't already uploaded. Would be happy to. The obligatory disclaimer, we'll skip that. And it isn't displaying really well, but the one thing I would say is this is supposed to be a digital pasture with the cows and the pasture and the corn being there. The entire presentation is kind of corn themed. But basically the idea is that you have a farmer that's standing on the edge of their field. They have the cows, which are the algorithms producing value, and you have the pasture, which is the data, and all of a sudden the farmer looks out, there's a new fence there. And so the fence is ethics, laws, regulations, corporate requirements, contractual requirements. And so the farmer has to really decide what he's going to do now. Is he going to tear it down? Is he going to find ways to go around the fence? Is he going to build a gate in the fence? I don't know, but that really kind of represents where we are with legal and policy and corporate requirements for artificial intelligence. You really have to determine what your next steps are to still remain relevant and to provide value. So planting the corn seeds or training the machine. So one of the things I see a lot with AI and people who are in the corporate world, even in IT, is that we still lack a very basic understanding of terminology. And so what I try to do here is I hit some very high-level concepts of AI. Some of you are probably very familiar with them. So what's an artificial intelligence system? I'll do a little bit of reading here. So it's a broad term used to describe engineered systems that use various computational techniques to perform automated tasks. Discriminative artificial intelligence. This is essentially AI that makes predictions, also known as machine learning. It's been around forever. Then we get into generative artificial intelligence, or Gen AI. It's a field of AI that makes deep learning, trained on large data sets to create new content. Unlike machine learning, generative AI makes predictions on existing data. So, if you were going to sum it up, AI, or Gen AI, is AI that is trained and can generate new content. Retrieval augmented generation, or RAG models. This has kind of come out of nowhere recently, but very important to the continued evolution of AI. So it's a technique that allows the system to incorporate external data into the generated response. So typically AI models are limited with their training data. Some are a year behind, maybe 6 months behind, and what RAG models, in layman terms do, they allow them to go and retrieve other more recent data to make the response more relevant, and also to eliminate errors like hallucinations and other issues. Model context protocol, it's essentially API for AI to allow AI models to interact between external tools, data sources, and services. So AI what? AI assistance, basically AI systems designed to perform tasks and provide information to users. So user provides natural language instructions to the model or the assistant, generally called assistants, bots, or co-pilots. Get a nice diagram here of kind of some examples. So for AI assistants, you can kind of think of that as Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant, etc. AI bots, you see a lot of those that are customer service bots now, unfortunately. AI co-pilots, it's kind of your GitHub co-pilot, Microsoft 365 co-pilot, or whatever Microsoft wants to call it today. And then AI agents acting autonomously. Agentic AI is AI systems designed to autonomously make and act upon decisions with limited human oversight. Often referred to as being able to pursue complex goals with limited supervision. And if you're going to sum it up really succinctly, it's AI that can do stuff itself. Another term that I've heard kind of pop up recently that's very important is foundational AI models. So these are the large-scale AI models that have been trained extensively on diverse data sets to enable broad capabilities. So typically, developers of AI technology will take a model like OpenAI, Anthropic's Claude, Facebook's Llama, Grok, any of those, and then build upon them to do whatever their intended goal or objective is with their product. Also called general purpose AI or frontier AI, that's popped up a lot recently as well. Developers of the foundational models are often referred to as frontier developers. So steward of the land, we're going to jump into a little bit of AI ethics. So the one thing to keep in mind is AI itself does not have any innate moral compass. The developers of AI all have different values, different beliefs, different backgrounds. And so the way that we can establish some link back to ethics is by establishing or understanding basic responsible AI models. And if you look out into the world of responsible AI, there are many, many different versions of this that you'll see. This is actually kind of taken from the IBM model, but there are also many other frameworks out there that are good references. The IAPP, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, is a good reference too from a definitions and background perspective. They have a lot of good resources out there, but there are a lot of different versions of this. How explainable your AI model is, how transparent is it in making decisions and processing data? Does it allow for privacy of data subjects? Is it robust? Is it not prone to errors? And is it fair in how it processes data? These are some very high-level concepts. And then we get into big AI ethics and ethical questions. So from a human rights perspective, do we allow AI to process and make critical decisions? And as AI becomes more autonomous, how does that impact us as humans? So specifically business, from a business perspective, hiring, firing, performance assessments, what are we going to allow AI to do, and what should AI be allowed to do? Another one is AI replacements. So we're getting to the point where in certain professions, AI could plausibly be an entire replacement for the professionals in that profession. A good example is, let me introduce you to Tilly Norwood. Tilly kind of popped up out of nowhere over the last few days in popular culture. Tilly is an aspiring AI-generated actress whose likeness is owned or was produced by AI production firm in the UK. And now this firm is actually seeking to find an agent, a talent representative for Tilly. Other things, freedom of autonomy. So once AI is able to make decisions, what should it be allowed to make decisions for? And then impact on humanity. Should we use AI at all? And these are some questions that I think we all have to consider. But then there's the concept of P-doom. So a lot of very smart AI experts have been opining on the viability of AI to essentially wipe out humanity or cause humanity's collapse. And people like Elon Musk and other knowledgeable individuals are out there who have made some predictions on whether we are totally doomed. So some other examples, just from kind of pop culture. If you recall, HAL 9000 malfunctioned in 2001: A Space Odyssey because he had a conflict, whether to fulfill his mission or keep the crew safe. And ultimately, he tried to kill the crew. And then there's the Terminator example, where ultimately Skynet tried to wipe out humanity with a nuclear strike. I'm not sure if I made the appropriate sacrifices to the live demo gods today. It worked about 10 minutes ago. And probably not. All right, we'll skip that. So if anyone knows what this is in the picture, if you grew up in Iowa, rural Iowa, you probably have done this before. It's detasseling crops, corn. Been there, done that. But kind of talking about AI governance. Just from a higher level perspective, what are some very basic components to AI governance? I will not hit them all, but AI policy, making sure you have well-documented policies, clear lines of responsibility, you perform AI risk assessments, you manage the life cycle of your AI models and your AI technologies. You're actually performing audits, the compliance processes, security, of course, and data management are some. These are kind of some high-level things from a governance perspective. So continuing on from a corporate governance perspective, what the board wants. And I think a lot of the times we think of just kind of general governance and compliance, but really I think governance starts from the level of the board. So AI is a board level imperative. Boards need to act now with velocity and precision to ensure their organization remains competitive and secure. First and foremost, boards want a demonstrated return on investment, but if you know anything about boards, they have a fiduciary duty to the long-term success of the corporation or the organization. So legal responsibility to the best interest, either to shareholders or to stakeholders if you're a non-for-profit or another type of entity out there. But a really good model that has been put out there is from the National Association of Corporate Directors for board oversight, and really 3 pillars or 3 areas to focus on for the boards. So they start with strategic oversight. What is the overall strategy of the company or organization? How are they going to allocate a capital? AI risk, and then also ensuring that there is technical competence within the organization. And keep in mind, what they are doing at a board level, they are not setting this strategy, they're ensuring that the strategy is in place. Because the boards of directors direct, they do not manage. The other thing, directors are aware of the legal risks to the corporation and to themselves as fiduciaries. So underperformance, if AI is not used, a really big pressure within the past 10 to 20 years as activist investors. If a board is not ensuring appropriate performance or not taking the appropriate approach, you tend to have activist investors who will move in, try to take over the company and the board, and seek new pathways. Also, directors, of course, have concern about misuse and unexpected behaviors and high-risk processes. Why? Board members don't want to be a board member when their technology or product becomes Terminator and tries to wipe us all out. Some other kind of interesting things, only 43% of boards right now believe that they're keeping pace with AI and generative AI developments. What this is doing is it's forcing refreshment to the board. In other words, people who have been on boards are stepping off of boards, adding board members to the size of the board, and just generally obtaining new talent from an AI perspective and also a cybersecurity perspective. But the one thing that I did find is interesting that's been talked about recently in the Wall Street Journal and a few other publications is that boards are looking to their CISOs as advisors on AI. And I will show you why in a moment, which is confirmed with another study. So what the CEO wants. The CEO wants efficiency, customer experience improvements, improved business resilience, new lines of business. They want to shift repetitive tasks to machines and technology. And they want to align human and technology contributions to key business processes, upskill humans to fully utilize AI-enabled machines, and of course, they want project success. So I think you've heard this earlier in the conference yesterday or on Thursday. 42% of organizations have abandoned AI initiatives. And despite there being 30 to 40 billion in enterprise investment in generative AI, 95% of organizations are getting zero return. I think some people have said this is 95% have been failures. The exact language is actually 95% of organizations are getting zero return, which you could consider a failure at that point. And then also, CEOs are looking for technology selection and ensuring that they've selected the right technology. and then, of course, trust. Interestingly enough, CEOs don't really think much of their peers and their direct reports, and this is why. They want savvy executives. Well, the person that they trust on AI right now the most, according to Gartner, is the CISO, followed by the COO, and on the other end, chief legal officer and chief human resources officer. I will provide my slides to the conference and also LinkedIn. All of this is very extensively footnoted if you're interested in the sources, so just reach out and you can get that. Kind of goes to technology selection, so I thought this was good. This kind of illustrates from Gartner on their perspective of where we are in the hype cycle. Gartner publishes a hype cycle for a couple hundred technologies or areas of technology, and artificial generation or artificial general intelligence is heading to the peak of inflated expectations. Generative AI is going down into the trough of disillusionment, and you've got some other items over here that are starting to get to the slope of enlightenment. But just from a high level, what does this say? The things on the left are pretty immature. The things on the right are actually growing in maturity and usefulness to corporations. So what does this mean for the farmers, the employees, the normal people out there? Most boards and CEOs are not looking to mass layoffs yet. If you look to recent studies from the Society of Human Resources Management, 12.6% of current employees face high or very high automation displacement risk. Another recent study from a company called Challenger and Gray directly attributed 17,000 tech job layoffs to AI this year. So we all need to enhance ourselves as human capital and upskill. So managing pests and weeds, that's from an AI risk management perspective, counting the corn and measuring the risk. So risk tolerance, just some basic terms, the amount of risk an organization is willing to accept. So from a driving perspective, you can think of it as a speed limit. And risk appetite, the allowed variance from the risk tolerance before corrective actions are taken. So again, from a driving perspective, you can think of this as when law enforcement starts writing tickets. So is it when you're doing 72 and a 65? It's what your company or organization determines. And then some general risk treatment approaches. So these are all pretty standard. What do you do about risk? You eliminate or remediate. You reduce, which is mitigation. Transfer, which is most commonly insurance. Accept should be on there as well. AI risk. So just some really quick things here to reiterate. All the traditional enterprise risks are still present. So you still have the financial risks, operational risks, strategic risks that are out there, and then compliance risks. And then under operational risks, you would consider bias and hallucination. Interesting kind of side notes from an operational risk perspective. Deloitte in Australia produced a study for one of Australia's government agencies, and despite having regulations preventing that, Deloitte allowed AI to help produce this report, and there were a number of hallucinations that were discovered by the Australian agency, and now Deloitte has to rewrite the report and pay them back, and also probably pay them fines as well. Another interesting note around risk management and compliance risks, you get into intellectual property disputes. While I'm not an attorney, this is kind of interesting because the Copyright Office has said that directly produced content by the AI is not copyrightable. However, and this was confirmed by a district court, but later on the Patent and Trademark Office clarified that if there is some human modification to it, that it may be copyrightable. We shall see. As with many legal issues, it will take several court cases to actually solidify this. And then there's also the high-profile lawsuits which have been filed against OpenAI, Meta, and others for using content to train their AI models. From a more of a tactical perspective, the conference board recently kind of did a study, and they rated risks in 1 to 5 related to AI, and executives rated them as reputational risk being 1, cybersecurity related to AI 2, legal and regulatory risk 3, intellectual property 4, and privacy is 5. And then if you want to talk at the foundational model and assessing risks, there's a lot of academic papers out there. There's one that I recommend that was produced by AI Ethics and their AI Ethics board that really gets into talking about those basic ethical tenets that I discussed earlier and relating it to different risks with the foundational models. And just some kind of other thoughts, just being proactive with risk management, trying to address bias and errors before they actually occur, and then safeguarding the integrity of the AI models and the data that goes into them. So ensuring crop quality or AI compliance. Basically, we need to ensure that we're complying with privacy laws still. So all of the privacy laws that already existed prior to AI and AI laws and regulations, they all still exist. And with that, we need to make sure that we're protecting individual rights. Kind of doing a look at AI laws, you have the EU AI Act, which is the world's first comprehensive AI law. It does have some potential extraterritorial impacts like GDPR, fun times, it impacts us. China, if you want to read about all the AI laws that China has passed, there are several. I would just do a Google search for those. They're impactful if you do business in China. And then in the United States, while we lack a national AI law, there are several which are important for consideration. Just a kind of a tracking map here. Red is where there has been a AI bill that has been signed. It may or may not be in force yet. Kind of zooming into California, a couple of really important bills to consider here. In September, one thing of note, in addition to, I believe, Senate Bill 53, it was Governor Newsom signed 18 new laws into existence, into effect. So lots of different things occurred from a California perspective regulating AI, including deepfakes, election protection, automated decisioning in workplaces with AI, healthcare and human in the loop, particularly around insurance. You get Colorado, commonly called the Colorado AI Act. It was to go in effect on February 1st. They actually, a few weeks ago, just changed this because the legislature in Colorado wants to revisit this, and now it goes into effect in June. And since we're here, Iowa. So Iowa did have the makings of a AI law that was working its way through the legislature. It is inactive, so did not take effect or anything of that nature, but there was something that was kind of working its way through the process. So some important AI governance, risk, and compliance frameworks. The NIST AI risk management framework is very important to consider. And then ISO 42000 2023, and then some others. I would say the why is ISO 42001 so important. It's the world's first AI management system that you can certify against. This is kind of like ISO 27001. You can actually prepare for this and actually go get a certified from a certification body. So harvesting the crop. So you're probably wondering this, he promised to talk about policies. Well, I did, and everything that I think you saw there kind of prepares you for actually writing a policy and all of the things and components you need to be aware of to actually write in a policy. So kind of keeping in mind what is our objective with writing a policy. It's building stakeholder trust, ensuring accountability, and also regulatory compliance, of course. From my personal perspective and how I've written policy, this is how I've approached it. And it's kind of a process or a waterfall, if you will, starting with understanding the strategy from the board of directors, understanding the executive leadership strategy, what are my legal, regulatory, and contractual requirements regarding AI? Have I done my risk, and do I understand the significant risks that face the organization? Have I identified my important internal stakeholders? Do I understand the organizational culture? This is important because if I write a policy that is too restrictive or not restrictive enough, it may be rejected. And then adopt a framework. So this is where ISO 42001 comes into play, or the NIST RMF. And then finally, that results in a policy. From a policy build-out perspective, I think you have two choices with AI and new technology topics in general. You can write a specific AI policy, which I think a lot of people are doing because it's kind of the easiest thing to do within their existing framework. Or you can infuse existing policies with AI coverage. In other words, anywhere that you feel that AI needs to be addressed, like access control for AI or covering specific things related to data classification, you would put the AI coverage in those policies as opposed to writing a specific AI policy. And I think this is one of those cases where you really have to understand your policy approach and what will work best for your organization. And then there's the question of what's your policy approach? Is it prescriptive, or is it performative or values-based? In other words, are you going to be very explicit in all of your policy requirements and how people should adopt AI? Or are you going to set very values-based, you should do this or you should not do this, but not delve into the specifics of how to comply with that? There are positives and negatives. I've seen both. The prescriptive, you can get yourself into traps with outlawing specific technology, or people will find a gap and then go do something that they shouldn't because they can say that, well, it wasn't documented in the policy. So steps for drafting and refining AI policies. So again, stakeholder engagement. You need to find and engage all the relevant stakeholders. What I suggest is consider an AI governance committee or an AI steering committee. This is what I've done at my organization. It works well because I, as the security executive, can pass some of the weight of decision-making around AI or the perceived decision-making around AI to other executives within the business. Keep in mind that the business units really should be owning the risk. However, it's all about perception as well. Risk assessment, you need to do a risk assessment, I believe, as part of your policy drafting exercise, policy drafting step, and then training and iteration. You need, after you pass a policy or implement a policy, you need to make sure that there is appropriate training and implementation steps. Just some additional things to think of. when you're writing policy, it needs to be very clear in your intent. You need to effectively communicate it, and then it needs to be enforced. Also, ways to monitor and measure success. Look at metrics around compliance or non-compliance. Integrate feedback loops. So maybe even put in a way in a policy to provide feedback or who to contact if there are questions on. And then continuous adaptation. As things change, update your policy as needed. Tools and resources to support policy implementation. Compliance software. This is going back to the GRC suites. They're evolving to support AI and AI decision making. Monitoring tools. What can you do to provide real-time oversight and insight into policy violations and track AI system performance. And then external frameworks really rely on what the so-called experts have developed already for you. So going back to the NIST, RMF, and ISO 42001. And here's a general policy outline that I've used before. And so just some kind of highlights that I've seen in policies. You have the authoritative statement, why you have the policy, what organization is for, all of those types of things. Enforcement. So if you don't have any type of enforcement clause, people can walk around it. Reporting requirements. So if there's a violation of the policy or there's an incident, what are the reporting requirements? Definitions are helpful. Guiding principles and ethical guidelines. This is where you can outline your organization's guiding principles for AI. Jumping back to earlier in the presentation where we talked about the basic ethical principles of AI use. Inputs, covering your inputs and training data and your outputs. Specific use clauses around AI tools. Potentially listing AI uses by data classification, and then specifically, given your data classification, what are some permitted and prohibited uses? What are the impacts on third parties? And then explicitly prohibited uses for AI. If you know of some things that you do not specifically want people to use AI for, you can put that in there. And then also, what are requirements for training? So a really good example, I've been helping an organization onboard Microsoft Copilot, and they were required to complete training and read their acceptable use policy prior to actually being allowed to use Microsoft Copilot. And so that's kind of an example of some things you can do to require policy and training. So in sum, adopting AI responsibly requires addressing many security, legal, and ethical challenges, and I think you can do this with care in a policy. And then also you have to balance innovation and risk through effective policies. Organizations can actually do that. So I think that is the benefit of an effective and well-written policy. And thank you very much. Good. I think I have maybe a couple of minutes for questions if anyone has any questions. All right. Thank you.